welcome to the 8th and final installment of the FabFilter course. In this video, we're going to be covering the FabFilter Saturn, which is FabFilter's dedicated distortion unit. And as far as distortion units go, this is probably one of the coolest ones, and it's certainly one of the most versatile because it allows for multi-band distortion. You can have up to 5 bands that you can distort independently with their own distortion styles. Each of those bands can be then modified according to a post-effects EQ. Each of those bands could be modified according to its stereo information and processed according to mid-side processing, such as the kind that we saw in other FabFilter plugins, such as the Pro Q2. Finally, we're able to modulate all of that with a very detailed modulation matrix. It's not really a matrix, it's more of a panel that you can add different modulation sources, but you can assign those modulation sources to many different things. But I think most importantly, it sounds incredible. All these different distortion styles sound fantastic. I'm going to show you a short demo and just keep everything to relatively simple demonstrations, because it's very, very easy to get completely lost in this thing and spend hours just looking through all of the different styles and then matching them up together and mixing them and combining them in different ways, because it becomes a totally different animal when you start to introduce several new bands into the equation and then have them function under completely different circumstances. The result tends to be a really dynamic, interesting sound from an otherwise bland signal, which is kind of what I have here. I have like a techno-ish thing going. I'm going to turn off the distortion and just show you what I have. Certainly thicken up that baseline, and this is exactly why I am employing the help of Saturn, because we can apply different distortion algorithms to the high end, get something more metallic and something raspy, and then from the low to mid end, what I want to do is use something like a warm tape to just accentuate and bring out more warmth from that area. But generally speaking, you can go from just light saturation of your material, maybe bring out some even harmonics and just make it sound a bit more colored, all the way to totally demolishing your sound past the point of recognition. Anything is possible when it comes to distortion. So what you're going to do is try adding this a band. And the way you do that is by simply clicking the little plus symbol when it appears at the top of your screen. This little plus symbol mechanism should be familiar to you from the Pro MB. It uses the same mechanism. We're just going to use 2 bands currently. And let's solo the top band. And enable our Saturn. And let's start to bring up the drive a bit. So let me delete this band actually. I'm going to show you what it's doing. If it's a single band, because that's the best way to assess directly how a distortion algorithm sounds. So it brings way more heat into the sound, but at the same time it isn't jarring to the ear, because it's functioning as a real tape saturator. This is one of the most authentic tape emulating saturating plugins that I've ever used. It's the tape algorithms are incredibly accurate, but also can be pretty nasty if you push the feedback values up. The feedback is basically feeds the sound back into itself and can generate pretty nasty little feedback harmonics. You can modulate the frequency of those harmonics by changing the frequency directly. You can get really interesting timbres with the feedback. Old tape is kind of the same thing, but just with way more high-end saturation. I really like the power amp. Power amp is one of those distortion algorithms that's kind of lacking in the high end, but thankfully we have a post effects EQ that we can use. If you're using left-right mode, you can pan the distorted signal left or right, with the dry signal being sent to the other direction. Currently the sound lacks any dynamic range, it's all crushed, but you can restore that by bringing the band dynamics backwards towards having more dynamic range. And finally, you can change the mix if you don't want the entire distorted signal. But I kind of like it. As I said earlier, this is quite juicy, but maybe we can split up the frequency range in two and process the high end separately to get even more out of the high end. You can change the level of the different bands outright by modulating this amount or changing the value of the snop. So instead of power amp, I want to try something like it's always fun to mix and match these things, but which one should we try? Kind of want to try some nasty ones. Destroy, rectify, these ones are based on various sample and hold mechanisms. Yeah, that's pretty familiar. I like Screaming Amp. It's very reminiscent of various guitars, of an old guitar distortion pedal. And as you might imagine, the feedback sounds pretty crazy. Trying to find the right balance here. I like that timbre that the feedback is giving it, so I want to retain that somehow, but not in a way that makes the band seem very separate. I still want it to sound like one cohesive whole. Yeah, so a lot of possibilities with regards to panning. But let's instead of using the mid-side processing. Let's try, or left-right processing. Let's try mid-side processing, and then pan this heavily distorted upper signal to more towards the side component of the signal. So it's going to be distorting more of the stereo. Really trying to get the feedback to work, but feedback is just intrinsically incredibly unstable, and it's really difficult. Sometimes it gives you great results, and sometimes it just yells one frequency no matter what. So. That sounds pretty insane. We can use some modulation on top of this to modulate any parameter you want virtually. Let's try to get at this feedback frequency. I want to see if we can get it under some kind of control. What I'm going to use an LFO. Feel free to look at the other ones, such as envelope generators and envelope followers. They're all pretty cool. But the LFO is pretty nice here. What I want to do is I want to get kind of like a siren effect. See if we can wrestle it into our domain. It's rather hard to get right. So obviously you have free control, or you can be synced up to a host. I want to have maybe a bar. And you can change your offset. Yeah, so that's gonna throw you off balance after a little while. So I want a frequency offset of 1. Is this not? Yeah. And this is effectively the amount. You can also reverse the polarity by pressing this plus/minus button. Can give some pretty awesome melodic content. That's why I usually love these things. You can get similar effects in comb filtering. Comb filtering with high feedback tends to give you very melodic effects and timbres that tend to be quite metallic. Try those out and supplement the melodic and harmonic content of your actual music. That's kind of what I was measuring. So, I mean, as you can imagine, the possibilities are absolutely endless. With just these few parameters, you can keep in mind, this is applicable to 5 different bands, up to 5 different bands. So you can really take your distortion to another level when it comes to the control that you have. And all of these sound so good that, I mean, you're not going to need that much by way of labor to get a really cool sound. Anyways, I hope you enjoyed the course so far. We covered a lot of different things, ranging from basic compressors to the most complicated and interesting distortion units that you can get. I hope you learned something along the way about maybe mixing and something about mastering, something about distortion and reverb. And we hope to see you next time. Thanks a lot for watching. Bye.